diversity contact for Duke Medical School. She is also the associate director of the Master of Biomedical Science program, and she's on committees to help ensure that there are to help encourage underrepresented students in STEM and medical fields. So I'm gonna let Dr. Cullins get started after I make her host.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's a rainy day, and I know that doesn't typically impact a Zoom call, but I find that rain can sometimes take a toll on whatever I'm doing, whether I have to go outside or not. So thank you so much. And I'm really pleased that you have organized into this journal club. It's a remarkable way to get information, do a little research on your own, to share and teach each other. The bringing in guests is certainly a fine way to get information and to bring focus to what you're doing. So thank you for doing this. How old is the organization, Rebecca?
We started during the summer, just before this semester, because actually Myra came to me and Shabazz with the idea, and we all realized that there are a lot of internships, research positions that were canceled for the summer. So we thought that this would be a really good way to get students some research experience before the next school year started.
Well, it was an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea. So I had invited several women to come. I don't see them on the call, so we'll see. But if you see Dr. Jonna Frierson, she's an engineer. Because I will not be able to see who's in the call. I see Kanisha Bethay. Would you introduce yourself, Kanisha? I think I see you there. Or maybe she's away from the...
I'm sorry, Dr. Cullins, what did you say? My apologies.
I just want you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kanisha Bethay. I'm a research program lead at Duke for the Clinical Translation Science Institute. I work for the Community Engaged Research Initiative. That's one of the cores within CTSI that focuses on bridging the divide between research and communities. And we primarily focus on engaging minorities in clinical research.
Thank you. Excuse me. And we may see Dr. Sherilyn Black, who is a biological scientist. So I'm going to do just a brief overview of the, excuse me, of the position of women in STEM in the United States. So I'm going to do a short PowerPoint just to make sure we're all on the same page. I imagine you've already shared some of this data, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I thought I would start by making sure that we were in the same place. So I'm going to share my screen and look at these brief data. So I was fortunate to be asked to do this. As I told Rebecca, I am not a scientist. I'm a social scientist. And I will say that when I started out, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I am specifically a sociolinguist by training, but I either wanted to do discovery science or I wanted to do languages. And needless to state, 40 years ago, if you were trying to find someone to help you make a decision between the two and you were a woman, it was always going to be languages. So that is, really where I landed. Excuse me. And it's been a good career, but I often think about that, what it means to have good direction and good mentoring. So again, thank you for having me here. So let's look at where we are today vis-a-vis women in STEM. Only a quarter of STEM workers, and let me say that included in this STEM data, excuse me, are research scientists who are physicians. So the MD, PhD folks are included in these data. So only a quarter of STEM workers are women. Women are roughly 50% of the labor force, and 28% of STEM workers are women and 72% are men. More women are graduating with STEM degrees, however. So over 200,000 graduated in 2016 compared with 140,000 in 2019, and the numbers have gone up slightly over the past couple of years, not by huge amounts. Women of color are grossly underrepresented in the STEM fields. Of all doctoral graduates, 86% are white. And we're talking women here. Less than 4% are Latinas, 3% are Black, and less than 1% are Indigenous women. Only 1 of 20 employed scientists and engineers in the US are Black or Latina. So there are fewer women leaders in STEM. 12.2% of board members in information technology are female. I just pulled out some careers. And there exists a huge wage gap, as there does between men and women who are employed in this country. As an example, women chemists earn 30% less than men at the same rank. And women who are married and with children are the most disadvantaged when it comes to fair wages. Women are more likely to leave the STEM fields than men, excuse me, reporting isolation, hostile work environments, and ineffective feedback. And what we mean by this is that women are not as readily mentored and are not given timely feedback if they need to make corrections in their fields. And so often a woman in the STEM field will be dismissed or moved to another project without having been given feedback and the opportunity to improve or remediate. We find this in medicine as well. So there's some early barriers to girls and women in STEM. Teachers and parents often underestimate their abilities. And we know there's lots of social science data that support that lowered expectations lead to lower outcomes. So lower expectations and biases are estimated to contribute to around half of the gender achievement gap in math. It's been found that parents tend to talk more about spatial relations and use spatial language with boys than with girls. So language choice is important, and linguists have looked at this over the decades. Parents from high-income families are more likely to reinforce the belief that boys are more capable and interested in math and science, investing in opportunities for their sons compared to daughters. This is an interesting bit of data that I haven't turned up enough to give you any additional information on that, but I've seen this reported several times, and I need to look farther into that to see why that's the case. It could well be that families in lower SES brackets are, excuse me, hoping that their students will engage in really whatever interests them and what they think will have them earn high incomes. And women who do enter scientific fields typically receive less credit and fewer citations. So women are listed as et al. Their works aren't cited as often. When other publications are being reviewed, they're not citing the work that's done by women. So these inherent biases impact women there as well. So another issue, girls and math anxiety. We know that those who teach children are predominantly women. So our early educators are women, and often women who are teaching girls and boys have anxiety about math, and we'll pass that on to girls. Girls are harder on themselves. They self-assess lower than boys with similar achievement. And unfortunately, this can continue into our adulthood and through our careers. Teachers are harder on girls as well. Girls are graded harder for the same work, and teachers often assume that girls need to work harder to achieve the same results. STEM remains a male-dominated culture. And because fewer women study and work in STEM, the ability to perpetuate inflexible, exclusionary, male-dominated practices goes on. Women are subjected to a greater frequency of harassment and gender devaluing biases in some fields of study, such as engineering and computer science, on campuses and in the professional arena. Girls and young women don't see examples of female scientists and engineers in books, in the media, and in popular culture. There are even fewer role models of Black women and Latinas in math and science. One study found that if girls had as many role models of women inventors as boys do to male inventors, the gender gap in innovation could potentially be cut in half. So the role of mentors and modeling cannot be understated, cannot be overstated. So why is all this information important? The first is the impact on earnings. The STEM fields pay more. It pays more to be an industrial chemist. It pays more to be an astronaut. It pays more to be a physicist, to be on the faculty in the STEM fields. It pays more to be a physician. So higher earnings compared to other careers. So there's a financial implication. The second is that the growth of employment in STEM has outpaced the growth of overall employment in this country. Since 1900, STEM employment has grown 79%, whereas overall employment grew only 34%. I'm looking back at the numbers. So you can see that's more than twice. It is incredible. And finally, diversity has been shown to drive innovation. A heterogeneous STEM workforce is less effective than one that embraces diverse backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. Excuse me. There's a lot of new data available on the benefit of having diverse teams, excuse me, please, and diverse workplaces. So this has been documented very heavily over the last 7-8 years. And so, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat. Diversity in STEM leadership. So let's look at the fact that because we have fewer people coming through in the STEM fields, there's less diversity at the top where good leadership could help drive diversifying the STEM fields for women and for people of color. So I just pulled out an example of how that works. So if we use faculty rank as a proxy for leadership in STEM, thank you. And let's look at chemistry because these data are relatively easy to find. So Chemistry and Engineering News reported that the chemistry faculty from underrepresented groups and women here remain stagnant. 1.6% of chemistry professors at the top 50 schools, as identified by the National Science Foundation, as having spent the most, excuse me, on chemistry research, excuse me, were African Americans, so only 1.6%. 28% were Latinx and less than 1% were Native Americans. In addition to CEOs and board members, which I referenced earlier, if we continue to look at the academy as a proxy, deanships in medicine and in the academy have relatively little female leadership. Principal investigators on government and foundation awards have little female representation, and department and division chairs have very little people of color and women representation in their ranks. So if we don't populate the high schools and the colleges and the graduate schools, we don't get to having people in position who can help change the climate, who can help change policies and practices for women, and thus work on retention and growing the fields for women and people of color. So the question for you, excuse me, and for people who do work that I do, it's where we can intervene. And the first thing we can do, and these are not easy things, it was easy to write this. This takes planning. Sometimes this takes planning. This will take policy change. But the first thing we can do is to prepare students for early success. Students need relevant and engaging curricula. Students need early development of leadership skills. This helps with self-efficacy. Students need to begin to see themselves in these fields early. We need to engage the parents of girls, because parents also participate in reinforcing stereotypes about what careers are appropriate for boys and for girls to pursue. We need to engage both men and women who are teachers around pedagogy, around the way girls are treated in the classroom vis-a-vis boys. It still remains true that girls are called on less frequently than boys, even when they indicate that they want to be called on. That still remains true. There needs to be support for pathway programs, also called pipeline programs, and they need to start early. There is some data that shows that students who are not achieving early in their academic careers will divorce academic achievement from ego as early as the 3rd grade. So we need to start early. And as we go along in the pathway into these careers, we need to formalize mentoring programs. We can't just assume that a mentor will land at a student's side and help them through the process. Flatten barriers, tell them what their options are, help them understand that an early failure will not keep you out of a career. And if I can give you an example of that, I was in a meeting, excuse me, where we were planning to formalize the mentoring programs in the sciences at Duke. And this was a program that was being designed for women and for underrepresented minority students. We had gathered the basic science faculty, most of whom were white and male, and we were in the Flowers boardroom on the West Campus of Duke. And one of the physicists said, well, I don't know what this is all about. He said, I didn't have any mentors, and look at me. He said, when I took my first physics course, Professor so-and-so sat me down and told me I needed to do this, this, and this. And, I said to him, well, Phil, that's the mentoring we're talking about doesn't happen for women and for students of color. Professor X doesn't just walk up to a young woman or to a student of color and say, this is what you need to do for your path. The man who provided you that information identified with you on some level and thought it was his role to make sure that you were successful. So it took a bit to have him understand that that is what's missing by and large for women and people of color. So we need to work on policies and practices that support women in the workforce. We need family-friendly, we need family-friendly practices. We need, and this needs to happen in graduate school as well. We need salary equity, and there need to be periodic salaries studies. We need formalized programs of advancement throughout the workplace. So, and equal pay, that will go a long way. And we need to normalize success. We're at the point now where we look at a Mae Jemison and say, oh, wow, she was something else to get to be an astronaut. There are thousands of women who could be Mae Jemison. And so, or any of another of the prominent women scientists who didn't have the opportunities, didn't have the mentoring, didn't quite know how to do it. And we need to dream big. We need to not limit ourselves and our potential by short selling ourselves. We need to dream big. So I'll end this and let's talk about it. Let me stop sharing here. And Kanisha, do you want to add anything to that? Are you still with us? Let me see. So does anyone have any comments? And I'll talk about some of the programs that we have at Duke that you may be interested to know about.
We have a question in the chat. I'll go ahead and
Okay.
read it out loud. How would you actionably enact these changes? And do you think all of these interventions are equally important, or are there some that would have a greater effect than others?
So it depends on where you are in this pathway. So there's some low-hanging fruit here. We can put in place, we can formalize mentoring programs at every stage of the educational experience and in employment. What's harder is changing policy. I cannot go to the superintendent of Durham Public Schools and say, listen, we need to bring the faculty together to talk about the way they address students in the classroom, right? The teacher work days are now filled with learning to deliver curricula over Zoom and how to engage students over Zoom and you know, what am I going to do when all these kids come back in my class? I don't want to get, you know, this infection. So it's harder to address the policy issues, but there's some things that we can get our institutions to do without a whole lot of grief. I'm not saying it won't take work, but it won't meet a lot of resistance because people who practice pedagogy know the importance of mentoring, know the importance of good coaching, and know the importance of good advising. So I would start with the low-hanging fruit. You guys are in college. You've got this wonderful program. And one of the things you might do is survey the faculty and see who would like to mentor students through the STEM fields. We just initiated a first-generation student program in the School of Medicine. We've always done things to support first-gen students, but this year we thought we would formalize our process. There are 2,400 faculty in the School of Medicine, and I sent a note through the HR website to every one of them. And we got back over 200 who were first-generation students themselves and who were willing to mentor the medical students, and found people in each and every one of our departments and divisions. So there's some things that you can just do to, you know, to help get yourself started. But I don't want to say one is more important than the other. If we're looking down the road, we've got to get the policies and practices. Is there another question? If someone could handle the chat, it would be easier.
Yeah. The next question was from Myra. Do you want me to say it?
If you don't mind.
Okay. Are you aware of any specific programs at schools in the area like Duke, NC State, UNC, or Meredith Women's College that focus on providing these type of mentoring programs to underrepresented students?
So we have programs at Duke, and they're, my goodness, the Park Scholars used to provide that, but I think it was for their cohort. That is who I work with most closely there. So we have several programs at Duke for Duke students that if you wanted to talk about models, we could certainly, you know, do that. Meredith, oh my goodness, I would hope the whole experience would be a mentoring program for women. But when it comes to sciences, we still need to pull people through with examples and with role models in the area. So I can't name any. I can name what, you know, what we've got going on. And perhaps one of the things we could do is I could connect you with some of these. So if you wanted to get some information on what's taking place and maybe how it's done, I'm happy to do that. And Rebecca, if you would send me an email to do that, I'll make sure to follow up on that for you. Yeah,
we just got an email from Dr. Easterlin today. He's our pre-health advisor, and he was talking to us about the Duke Reach Equity Summer Undergraduate Research Program. So is that open to all undergrad students? Or
yes, you can apply to Reach Equity. You certainly can.
Okay.
And you just need to go to the School of Medicine site and put it in the search.
Okay. So that could be one program, and I'll follow up with you about other ones. Our next question was, do you think early colleges are early enough intervention, or is there a systematic change we can offer earlier other than mentor programs? How do AIG programs fall in with these changes?
And what are AIG programs?
It's, well, when I was in high school, basically they took a group of kids that they deemed gifted and gifted as in extremely or smarter than other people and put them in a separate class for about I don't
Yeah.
know, 30 minutes a week. I think Hassan, you were part of AIG, probably some other kids here too.
Right. They have different names in different places. I don't think I've seen AIG. So the problem we're finding with the gifted and talented and AIG programs is that they don't reach the students of color. These are clearly good programs, but often what they do is segregate the schools. And so some other things have to happen. And many of them have to happen earlier so that students meet whatever the school criteria are for gifted and talented students. So again, I gave you the data about students separating academic achievement from ego as early as 3rd grade. If we're serious about this, and again, if we are, bigger, that's the other one, right? Thank you. If we are serious about this and we are taking the long view, if we're really looking at the future, we need to grab these kids in elementary school. We have 2 programs in our School of Medicine that work with Durham Public Schools starting at grade 3. And we follow them through high school, depending on which grant we're working on, through high school. We have a program that captures students after the 1st and the 2nd year. And we have a research opportunity for students in the 3rd year. So these programs largely target underrepresented minority students. And as is the case, and I know medicine better than the others, so you'll forgive me for giving you more medicine data than others. We know that there are more women or girls in these programs than there are boys. And that has to do with the way the behavior of boys is being penalized, starting in elementary school. And so boys are racking up disciplinary infractions and again, are not fully engaged with the school because of the way they're treated largely. So the girls are right now benefiting a bit more than the boys. From a number of these pipeline programs that are in place. And I have to say that as many as they are not nearly enough. They don't begin to approach the need.
And then someone asked, are you involved with Duke TIP at all? Or know about that?
When I was on the undergraduate campus, I was involved with TIP.
Okay.
And TIP is about to go away.
Oh.
So, I don't have the details. I just got a note about it. So I don't know when that will take place. But Ron Ely, who kicked off TIP in North Carolina, as well as a program called the Awards Committee on Education, which was a program for 9th graders, used to raise money de novo for those programs every year. But I don't know what is happening with TIP, except that I did get a notice about TIP, TIP closing.
Sad.
Yeah, it is very sad. It's very sad.
Our next question was, I remember reading an article about how girls perform better than or just as well as boys and even enroll in advanced science and math courses at equal rates moving into high school. But then the gender gap starts to appear as they get closer to college. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of the environment and the expectations that are set for girls once they get there. And one of the things that we don't build into high schools are programs that help with self-efficacy. So we don't help girls with things like imposter syndrome. We don't help the boys understand that their peers are also girls, right? And that they are not inherently smarter, because the girls beat them out until they get there at just about everything. So, and again, the girls are facing stereotypes, are still pushing against stereotypes as they go along. And as I told you, as early as elementary school, they persist. And you also find once you get to high school, there are more and more men who are teachers than women. So the modeling drops off dramatically.
I actually noticed that in my like education experience, the higher I go up in education, the more and more male professors there are.
Mhm.
And I think you
Absolutely.
also mentioned something about like how the way you're talked to really impacts the way that like you're perceived or the way you view your own self-esteem and stuff.
That's right.
And as like a woman of color going through the education process myself, I can say that that's like completely accurate. Like growing up, that there was like even like just looks wise, like I feel like my biggest thing was like my hair. Like people just make so much fun of how big it was compared to, I grew up in a very white like county, so there was not really anyone else with like my hair type. So I feel like just being constantly like called out and like kind of discriminated just because I look different. And then like as you get older, you have to, get back into the mindset that like, you can fit into a STEM field or into like
Mhm.
the school you are, even if it's predominantly white, is very like hard as like a person of color. And I, as a woman and person of color, it's just like it can get extremely difficult to understand that you fit into an educated society.
Absolutely. So we have to do these other things. We have to talk about stereotypes threat. We have to talk about imposter syndrome. We have to do things that help you maintain your self-efficacy as you go through these processes. And that is one of the things that mentoring and coaching will help you with. So even if you don't get into the workshops, or even if you choose not to work with a psychologist or a real professional coach, there are, it is necessary for you to find someone who will help you, find your path through there. And remember that you'll have many mentors as you go along. You'll have someone who will mentor you for whatever the discipline is. You'll have someone who will mentor you for the social cultural aspects of what you're trying to do. You'll have someone who will be sort of a life coach for you, help you see how you can manage a family and graduate school or college, and work and still be productive. And unfortunately, there's sometimes when that mentor will have to be a lawyer, depending on what you're facing and where you may find yourself down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't have just one mentor. And you also have to deal with the fact that because of the numbers, your mentor is likely not to look like you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be ready to take good mentoring where you find it. So the person who mentored me through student personnel work, because that is what I do now, student personnel services, was a white man named Bill Griffith. And it was Bill who told me how good I was with students, who told me how good I was into, integrating information, who told me that I could multitask and look at what was happening in residence life and still focus on what was going on in the LGBTQ center, that kind of thing. And keep it all going. And showed me I found joy in it, but showed me, just all the different places to look for joy in the work that I do. So that is, you will have different mentors, and they most often will not look like you.
Mm-hmm. Wait, that's actually pretty good advice. Someone asked, how do you recommend the average college student to obtain mentoring opportunities if they cannot get into these targeted programs or their college lacks resources, professors who want to take on mentoring roles?
I am so hopeful that it is not the case that your college has no one who wants to take on a mentoring role. And I tell you what I would do if you haven't been able to find someone in your field. We have a position at Duke called the Director of Undergraduate Studies. So there's a Director of Graduate Studies and a Director of Undergraduate Studies in every department. And that's the person who reports to the chair of the department. So I don't know how things are structured at North Carolina State, but if that role doesn't exist, I would go to the department chair. And I would ask for advice on who could provide that guidance in whatever the discipline is. I would start there. And the other thing is sometimes it's very hard to ask for the support because we fail to recognize that. Let's talk about tutoring, for example. We're just all so smart that when we hit that first course, where we are just not making an A. You know, we came blowing through college out of high school. And we got into those first courses and the sea was staring us for the very first time, right? And we didn't think about getting a tutor because we had been the tutors. It didn't occur to us that we should be tutors. But if you have a growth mindset, and I encourage all of us to work on a growth mindset to know that we can all improve and be better, the people, we will understand that a tutor makes a good student better, right? A tutor is a resource, not a crutch. It doesn't say that you have a deficit. It says you have an area of growth that needs to be developed, right? And we'll always have areas of growth that need improvements. I tell people all the time, I have huge pockets of ignorance, right? And so we all need to be able to work on those pockets of ignorance. It doesn't make me any less of a person, doesn't make me any less smart. You know, you'll still be brilliant if you have a tutor, but you'll nail that subject matter. That might have been a little bit foreign or might not have even been as well taught as it could have been.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
I have a quick question.
Oh. Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
Sorry to change the subject a little bit. So I'm Middle Eastern and I don't fit the textbook definition of a minority. And I was wondering, how can I stand out in my applications? I'm told to put white on my application. And I feel that kind of takes away from my experiences. And I was wondering if you can have anything to say on that.
So this is an application to what, graduate school, professional school? Any application?
I'm looking at med school and PA school. Both kind of have the same thing in the portal.
Well, if you look in the portal, you can indicate a national background. So you can put white and Middle Eastern white and African, Black and African, Black and Caribbean. The AMCAS application certainly makes that opportunity available for you. And we get,
awesome, thank you.
I see it all the time. White and Egypt, you know, I see it all the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it does provide context for your experience. So you should know it.
I had a question. I guess it's about like women within like different fields of STEM. Like I feel like for my generation, right? Like I think there's probably an equal, if not like higher amount of like pre-med girls than pre-med guys.
Mm-hmm.
But then like if you look at like, let's say engineering and physics and stuff like that, like there's very few women in those fields of STEM. Mm-hmm. So I guess how would you, like we've been talking about like STEM as a whole, but like even within STEM, there's these huge disparities in certain parts of it. So how would you address those like worst bits?
So a couple of things are happening. Medicine in general is being feminized. More women are going into medicine than men. And it's been trending that way for a decade, you know, maybe more.
But even within medicine, right? Like if you look at like surgical fields, like those are still.
Well, yeah, I was going to address that. That's true. That's true. So you're right. Surgery, orthopedics, ophthalmology, most of the specialties that pay the most money have men in them. And
no, Ms. Cullins, in our medical sociology class, we actually talked about that exact subject. And a big reason is because especially nurses are taught, like women are taught that it's their job to care, as nurses, it's their job to care. And that's why they should go into nursing fields because they're more appropriately fit for them. And that's why even in medicine, you see such a big gap between nurses, doctors, surgeons, and why women are usually in the less paying fields or fields that are like more feminine. And that's why you don't see as many male nurses, because people assume that a woman should be a nurse, or that if a woman is a nurse that she should be extremely caring and she fits those ideals. But obviously that's not true. And even within healthcare, if you look at the data, like women, because they have to take maternity leave and usually take some leave when they have kids, they get paid a lot less. But I don't think women should get punished for having a family when men don't get punished for having a family and having a career.
Yeah, that's one of the policies and practices we're talking about, family-friendly policies. But the thing, I hope they also told you that one of the reasons there are more men going into nursing is because we had a nursing shortage and the salaries went up. So there are more men pursuing nursing because they're being paid more. So the economics remain a driver.
I also wanted to add on to Rebia's point and what Shabazz was saying as well, because I'm thinking of applying to med school the next cycle. And just a trend I've noticed from a couple of articles that I read from my sociology class as well, is that it was kind of like what Dr. Cullins was saying, that, you know, we're seeing that medicine is being feminized, and especially we're seeing that in primary care specialties. There's so many women entering primary care. And I think the numbers right now are a little more than 50% of physicians in those specialties are women. And it's not like those specialties or those kind of practices were low paying to begin with. I think a lot of the data has shown that, you know, as the number of women in those fields has increased, it's corresponded to, you know, that same trend of a decrease in pay in those specialties as well. And I think that just corresponds to like just how the wage gap is present literally in every aspect of life, like all the way from, you know, minimum wage jobs to higher education jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, tracks that. And the primary care specialties do pay less. And one of the things that happens is that women even make decisions based on salary when it comes to choosing specialties in medicine. Many will start out seeking a primary care position and then end up going into a specialty because they're dragged in $250,000 in debt just for education.
Yeah.
And so we'll change what was an early aspiration to be in a primary care specialty to be into one of the higher paying specialties.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And for anyone who is interested in pursuing becoming a physician or going into medicine, especially in North Carolina, if you want to practice in North Carolina, Brody has a really good program that specifically addresses tuition and finance problems, where they've designed their program to, you know, be really low cost, so that when students are considering residency programs, that the salary of whatever field they want to go into isn't really a factor, so that students can pursue, you know, more primary care paths or more like lower paying, I guess, specialties as well. So that's just something to be aware of.
I also think it's important to add on to Myra's point. The wage gap is actually exacerbated the higher up you go in earning, as I understand it. It's more prevalent at the higher earning end of the spectrum rather than the lower earning end of the spectrum, like minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say on Hudson's point is that in sociology, there's also this thing called like the glass escalator effect.
Yes.
You know, even for men who are entering into professions that are female dominated, they actually experience, like on the flip side, you would think, no, you know, maybe women get more promotions and stuff like that, but you actually see the opposite. So men who are in female dominated fields and positions, they actually experience faster promotions and things like that, rather than the women who are in those fields.
Weight of culture.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this, like share my screen and show these graphs, because there's it shows you a quick skip, like a quick graph that kind of explains like the wage gap and like the differences in women and men in different like medical fields. And we just discussed this like recently in our sociology class, so that's why I'm pretty like it's still in my brain, but it shows like how we've been saying, like as you go like further and further into like vice president or like C-suite, which is like basically CEO positions, there's less and less women, and they're also like underrepresented. And like we kind of talked about how in like women are more represented in healthcare instead of like business or like management positions, and even in healthcare, like the higher paying wages were still not as represented. But these graphs just kind of show that.
So Ms. Cullins, sort of to summarize what we've been talking about, I guess, or just like compartmentalize it for myself and how I think, would you say that for this policy change to occur, right, this like long-term systemic change to occur, there has to be a societal like mindset shift first, sort of a change in like the American social contract that equalizes men and women before we engage like a policy shift? Or do you think that the policy shift should come first and then we should focus on like altering the social contract of America to ensure that, you know, women are considered equal to men outside of just policies that enforce that concept?
So I would say we looked at how this nation has hiccuped along toward social justice, that often we need policies and practices to change behavior, to change culture. So, and that's hard work. The Equal Rights Amendment hasn't been ratified by 2/3 of the states. You know, we have national guidelines on an employment law, you know, that's federally mandated. And yet and still, you know, these wage gaps persist. So what we don't have is really strong law, and we don't have good institutional practices. So for instance, I'll just use my own institution. When I was on the undergraduate campus, I felt we needed an employment level for the paraprofessionals in our division. It didn't exist. And in order to get that in place, now we're at a private institution that could just do it, right? It took me 1.5 years to gather enough data to justify this level position. And that was looking for examples of it at other schools, looking for it in the federal pay levels, just as an example, because our own are modeled against those. And then doing a salary study. Took a heck of a lot of time to get people who were making, I don't remember what they were making now, but I would say today, folks at that level might be making $20 an hour, but really ought to be making 30, right? So it took all that work 1.5 years to create that thing and make it right, you know. So we have that position, and it has been a path for people who are on the biweekly payroll to get onto the monthly payroll, which has a different benefit structure, right? So it's hard work, and just like the work that is now in the news is anti-racist work, you have to figure out where to push in the institutions that will impact change, and hopefully culture change, at least institutional culture change. So I don't know if that was a good enough example to show you just, you know, where I think what we need to look at it to make decisions about where we push for change, to create change.
I really appreciate your answer. Thank you.
And kind of to add on to that, I kind of feel like when it comes to this whole like culture versus law debate, it's really a cycle. You know, you see these cultural shifts and they lead to laws changing, and then the laws change, and then the culture shifts, and then the culture shifts more, and then the laws change. So like, you know, hopefully like with that cycle, stuff continually improves, but you know, you have to start somewhere. And so like, I guess with changing laws or like changing different policies, whether it's on a state level, at a university level, or on a federal level, like all of those things will promote that cultural shift. And then hopefully things will get better gradually.
It's a lot of work, guys. It's a lot of work, yeah.
I don't know.
Talking about like you were talking about like with the civil rights movement and stuff, like slavery ended like what 150 years ago, and we're nowhere near resolving any type of racism or social justice. But obviously we have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. I knew somebody was gonna say that. I knew somebody was gonna say that. But like, I guess that's one example of like the cycle helping, but then obviously that needs to be done for women in STEM as well.
Shaz, I think you bring up a really good point, because even going back to what Rebbe was saying about, you know, AIG and like gifted programs like that earlier, so much of that, like that type of academic tracking where like they put you into those gifted classes, so much of that is based on like race and class. And it's so hard, I feel like, to get people to see that, because, you know, there was like a case of like the Fields family in California where they had to get the ACLU involved to sue the school district because, you know, their child, she was a young Black girl, like in high school, you know, she met all the class requirements to take this AP advanced math class. And, you know, for whatever reason, maybe implicit biases or whatever was going on, her teacher wouldn't give her the recommendation to take the class. And, you know, how many, you know, families have the option or like the time or the resources to go through litigation to, you know, get a school district to just let their child take a gifted class. And, you know, a big trend is that, you know, with those AP classes and stuff like that, and just those gifted classes in general, a lot of it is white upper class, you know, people occupying those classes. And I feel like it's really hard to get people to look at that trend and to really realize it's a problem that needs rapid action, right? Because that affects children all throughout the education system, and it even affects them deciding to pursue STEM careers, even from grade school.
To sort of respond to you, Mara, that's actually, so Shabazz gave me a book on the civil rights movement that inspired me to look into critical race theory a little bit. And I don't know, as I understand it, critical race theory should apply to discrimination against any underrepresented group. I don't know how accurately it reflects like underrepresentation for women in STEM, but something it talked about, which is why I brought up the whole culture versus litigation thing, is Malcolm X's autobiography is the book Shabazz loaned me, but as I understand it, like the most significant changes policy-wise are inspired by like enforced culture shifts. And the real question comes in with like what Shabazz said of like which one do we start with, right? Because enforced culture shifts haven't always played off the best. They've been seen as like, again, attacking the majority, which is sort of a ridiculous concept in my opinion, but something that, you know, occurs historically, or at least is perceived as occurring historically. And then policy shifts have often been ignored if the culture doesn't shift with it, because there aren't enough like enforcements for the policy. And even when enforcements for the policy are brought around, people aren't willing to enforce the policy. They're willing to let it slide to maintain like whatever the previous culture was that still like pervades the institution or area, etc.
I kind of wanted to add, because we're talking a lot about culture, is like the feminist movement. And I think that we need to acknowledge that the feminist movement leaves out a lot of people of color and people like women, people of color, or religious women, because feminist movement is seen as very one way, and only one way of life is like acceptable. And that's why I don't think it's as a united movement, and it's not as strong as it could be, because I think the feminist movement leaves out a lot of women who want to choose to stay modest or choose to stay a housewife, and a lot of other women will look down on women who don't want to work right away or go into STEM fields. Like, I think the whole reason the feminist movement came about was to give women the choice to choose whether they want to stay at home or go into the workforce or go into whatever field they want or dress however they want, whether that be in whatever way it is. And I think that to create a bigger culture change, we need a movement that's a lot stronger and a lot more united.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But I feel like part of that is like that just knowing who controls, like, okay, so there is a sociologist named Johnston, and he talks a lot about privilege and how like even white privilege or just anything, it's focused on like, you know, having that idea dominated in society and centered in society. And I think a lot of it you can see in our media, you know, like who controls our media, who writes our textbooks and stuff like that. So when you talk about like feminism and stuff like that, I think it's so important to remember just historically, like it's always been, you know, white feminists who a lot of the time actually, you know, have like implicit bias or outright biases against women of color. So, you know, like even with Susan B. Anthony, right, she fought for the right to women to vote, or even the suffragette movement in general, like it was fighting for the right for women to have the right to vote, but it was mainly white women, right? Like Black women were completely cut out of that conversation, and other women of color as well. So I don't know, I think a lot of mainstream modern day feminism, at least it really centers on white women, I guess. I think that's kind of fair to say. I hope I didn't offend anyone by saying that. But I think it's just important to acknowledge, you know, that racial issues and class issues are present like everywhere, like in every aspect of society. And there was a really good sociology reading. I'll see if I can link it in the chat later. But it was about a feminist sociologist. I'm forgetting her name right now, but I'll leave it in the chat. And it was talking about how, you know, because she was talking about her experiences first with feminism. So she was talking about how in her experiences as a woman, like it's really apparent to her to see how, you know, men have been automatically elevated in society, and how it can, how like our educational systems, we teach that women have been disadvantaged, but we don't teach that men have been advantaged by it. And then she goes into talking about white privilege and how it's kind of following that same structure. So we teach that Black people especially, and then people of color more broadly, are, you know, oppressed and put down by society, right? But we don't really teach necessarily that white people have automatically, like, as an extension of that, been advantaged in society. And I don't know, what you said just reminded me of it.
I agree. Oh, sorry. Right before you speak. I was talking to one of my friends who's in my medical sociology class, and she's takes a lot of other sociology classes too. And she was talking about how one of her professors, he's a African American professor, so he had like a more of a right to speak about this. But he was talking about how even white privilege can be kind of bad sometimes, because like talking about it so much, because it kind of, they're like, he basically brought up this example of a school that was mostly like Black and Latino kids, and a lot of the Black kids got privilege in that school because a lot of the professors there were Black instead of Latino, and a lot of the Latino kids were left out of like the after school programs or any programs that they had. It was mostly just Black people in those after school programs, even though all of them are not as privileged to white people in ways. But I think that we need to recognize that privilege is more than just race. It's class, it's your race, obviously, and then there's so many other factors to like the type of privilege you have, like if you come from a single parent home, or like if you have, you know, your mom and dad, or your sexual orientation, or even like being born with being able to speak and hear and like have all your limbs. So I think that the conversation of privilege needs to be expanded to like a lot more than just race, if we want to like help society be more equal for everyone.
Rebecca, that's a really good point. And the last message that I just sent in the chat, it's a work by Johnson titled How Systems of Privilege Work. And it addresses racial privilege at the end of the work, but it in general talks about how systems of privilege work. And Homa, I think you have some comments that you want to make. So if you want to talk, you can go ahead and feel free to unmute your mic at any moment.
That sounds good. I just wanted to say, like, there's a term that like I took like I like just read up a bunch of sociology before. So like by the term intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw, she basically like she coined it, but like obviously like the idea has been like around for a while. Just everything that you two were talking about earlier, about class, about race, about like just like privilege as a whole. Like something that really helped me think about everything as a whole is not necessarily privilege, but like power dynamics, and like how people are like those things can shift a lot, and it's not necessarily always the same. Obviously those like bigger hierarchies are in place, but it changes based on your individual circumstances. And a way that it relates back to the like healthcare and like how we process everything is through ACEs. There's like a system basically where you I can't remember who came up with it, but it was a doctor on I think she was on the West Coast, and it basically just it's just determinants of health. Like if your family is divorced, if your family has gone through trauma, there's like a few different things, and if you meet the ACEs, and if you have like the more you have, the more likely you are to kind of like have like negative health effects based on that. And like as a whole, like you are not like people are not marginalized, or like there's no such thing as marginalized communities. Like people are like marginalization occurs, if that makes sense. Like you inherently aren't like, I don't know if that's making sense, but like as a whole, like people don't like they aren't inherently in this lower position. It really just depends on how you're treated, and like we have to keep that in mind. And that's kind of just like adding to what Rabia said earlier. But yeah, that's just all I had to say. Thank you.
So let me ask you about this organization. So I've got my gallery view on it, and I'm looking at everyone here. Are there Latinx and African Americans in this club?
Yes.
Just didn't show up for this chat, or I'm just looking at just faces and making bad assumptions potentially about names.
So I think a lot of our participants who come to the weekly meetings come from like I know I'm South Asian. A lot of the board is South Asian and Arab.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of members who are Latina and African American, but I think they come based on whenever they can. Like a lot of people just come based on when they can. So I think a lot of the participants in this club is not representative of our whole club, because we do have a lot of African Americans from Central University who do come to our club. But again, it's really based on like their availability, because we want this club to be like a low commitment club. Like you come when you have time and don't stress if you have, you know, work, family, and other commitments.
So everyone will have an opportunity to see your recordings. And
if you want a better, if you want a more accurate view of like the demographics of our club, we have a club blog where we have like study presentations from Latinx individuals and African American individuals all on display. And yeah, I don't know if this meeting's the best example, but we have had like 30 people meetings and stuff, and I think our club overall has 100 people, and we're relatively closer to 200, and we're relatively racially diverse. We don't have exact statistics on it, but I at least personally know that we have several Latinx and African American individuals that attend most meetings.
Yeah, you all are learning all the right things, language and all that, but it takes practice. You know, we have to practice these things that we're learning that we know will make it better for everybody.
Wait, Doc, do you have any tips on how to encourage more minority students to come to the meetings or anything like that? Because we would love to have more diverse meetings. I think we generally tend to have more South Asians because me, Shabazz, Myra, Hassan, we're all Pakistani. So all of our, you know, friends usually join and stuff. They're mostly Pakistani or at least they see South Asian. And then Zainab, our secretary, she's Arab. So then we have some like, you know, Arab, Middle Eastern people who join usually too. But we would love to create a more diverse environment. And when we started our club, we really tried to emphasize that we want a lot of diversity because we're all obviously minorities. So we really emphasized it. But I think maybe just the timing of our club being at 4 p.m., it's a hard time for a lot of people to join.
Well, you know, survey your membership and see what works and make sure the topics are broad.
Yeah, we've really tried to emphasize that even though we are like technically a STEM journal club, that students can talk about whatever issues are important to them or whatever kind of field that they want to talk about. So we've had a couple of presentations talking about, I guess, like sociological analysis of like a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of our members generally take a lot of like sociology classes. So like we've had so many
we've had one about horror movies, the science
and we've had meetings, even if it was something that was specifically related to like a cancer research or something like that, we've somehow managed to tie it into a lot of like different like social problems and stuff like that. We have recordings of our meetings on YouTube as well, so that people can watch whenever they can.
That's great. I wasn't asking you to defend the club. It was just a question about the composition.
I was just gonna say that like I don't know how else to put it, but like obviously all of us being South Asian and stuff, more South Asian people are gonna be coming to these meetings. And the fact that this club is new and all, like I feel like at least for now, that's probably gonna be the case. But hopefully like as this club picks up new board board members, I feel like you were talking about, right? Like putting women in STEM, people of color in these leadership positions, that's something that would help the club. So hopefully
you have to practice it.
Yeah, exactly. So like we're hopefully gonna have our first set of elections at the end of this year. And, you know, hopefully with people of color getting elected for these positions, that's what would influence the diversity of our club to grow.
Because Myra, Shabazz, and Zainab are all graduating.
Yeah, exactly. So we're all seniors, so we're gonna have a bunch of open board positions, and hopefully that will promote diversity.
Also, our advisor from NC State, he's also Latino, and he's done a lot of work promoting diversity at NC State. He founded a SACNAS chapter. I think I'm saying that wrong. He founded a SACNAS chapter. Oh my God. But he founded that at NC State, and I think that'll also help to help increase promotion, because he only started that the past couple of months. So I think, you know, having collaboration with that will also help us increase the communities that join our club.
Awesome. Good for you. It's hard work. Thank you for taking it on.
Huma asked, and Huma, if you want to ask, because you're unmuted now.
I just didn't want to interrupt. I was just wondering if, like, before we wrap up, if you have any suggestions for any mentorship programs that we should apply to or get involved with. I guess like not just like at Duke or NC State or Meredith, but like just in like the area overall.
Let me think about that, and I'll send a note back to Rabia. Most of the programs that I know about that are being formalized, even across the state or the nation, have to do with medicine. So let me think about that and see if we can. When I talk to my friends who are scientists on the campus, I'll let you know what I learned.
Yeah, a lot of our oh, sorry if you had anything else.
Oh, I was just appreciate that.
A lot of our students are pre-med based, so if you have, if they're like specific medical programs, that would be fine too, or research programs. I know a lot of people want to get research right now, but
it's going to be very hard now.
I had one question just specifically for me, like being that we're in COVID-19 and no one's really allowing shadowing or a lot of clinical opportunities, are med schools going to be very strict about how much clinical hours you have?
So the truth is medical schools have not been strict about clinical hours anyway. Oh. You're doing clinical work, having clinical experiences is career exploration. The idea is to let us know that you know what you're getting into. So you don't have to do surgery. You don't have to birth a baby. You don't have to save a life. We just want to know that you know what you're getting into, right? And the same thing for research. There are only a handful of the 155 medical schools in the US and Canada that require research. And research for many schools can be social science research or humanities research, because what we're looking for is evidence of intellectual curiosity. Looking for people who have asked and answered a question. So people are not going to suffer from not having basic science research activities because of COVID. You're going to have to do something else that demonstrates that part of your, that part of who you are, that you're intellectually curious, that you're a lifelong learner.
Like participate in STEM Journal Club.
I participate in STEM Journal Club. Exactly. So that's not going to hurt you. And if you go to the Association of American Medical Colleges site, you'll see where there are some opportunities for online clinical observerships that that you can take advantage of. So people are trying to be really creative about it. I would go to the medical school sites because some of the schools are making these opportunities available. I know we've got a couple that'll be coming online shortly, but they'll be posted up at the AAMC so that you know, larger numbers of students can have these experiences. But right now it's going to be observerships largely. And they're going to be remote for maybe another year, maybe two.
If anyone's interested in service for the coming semester or the coming academic year, you guys should definitely reach out to Urban Ministries. I was told earlier today that they're also accepting applications, and they're coming up with more creative ways to serve the community. So definitely check them out. I'll type their name in the chat as well.
That's a good one. I got an email from them yesterday looking for students.
Ms. Cullins and everyone else in the Zoom call, feel free to email us on the STEM Journal Club email or any of us personally if you have more of these opportunities, because we try and send out emails to our club members whenever we can about like, this is a good research opportunity that you could join, this, and so any suggestions you have that could help any of our club members gain the experiences that are important to progress their careers as students, we would love to hear about them.
And but for those of you who are pre-medical, know that the medical schools have been thinking about this forever. And most of them even have questions on their secondaries now that ask about how COVID has impacted your journey to medicine. So there's an opportunity for you to say, I had a plan to do X, to join the CAPO lab, but could not because of COVID.
And another thing for the pre-med students, I'm also the co-president for the pre-med club. We had Ms. Cullins there like a couple weeks ago. So if you want if you want to know about opportunities related to pre-med specifically, you can email me at mscon3@ncsu.edu.
Does anyone else have any more questions for Dr. Cullins or just for the club in general? Well, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for making our last SJC meeting for the semester exciting. And we had so much great discussion from Dr. Cullins. And Dr. Cullins, thank you once again for coming to speak with us about all of these important issues, specifically facing Black people and minorities, and especially women in STEM fields. Guys, just look out for our blog post in the next coming week where we'll detail a lot of what we discussed today and resources for you guys like urban ministries and other things that we discussed today.
And if you know anyone who wanted to come and miss this meeting, it will be uploaded to STEM Journal Club on YouTube, on YouTube, STEM Journal Club, NCSU in probably the next couple of hours.
Thank you all. I greatly appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bethea, for joining us. We appreciate it.
And this was a great discussion. Familiar with many of the books you all shouted out as well. And I would just echo what Dr. Cullins said in terms of it's great that everyone is well read, but practice is what makes the difference. But kudos to you all for the amazing work that you all are doing. It makes me smile that you are the future. So
absolutely.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a lot. Appreciate you.